And at the same time, the idea that this recording took place in Bedminster, keeping the door open for possible action in that state.
Well, it's a difficult position for his defense team to be in because they have to defend against essentially a moving target. They know what the charges are now, but they could expand in the future. And, prosecutors always can continue to investigate and add charges. I've done that before, actually, against a real estate developer myself when I was a federal prosecutor where, there was one set of facts and we, had issued an indictment on certain charges, kept investigating, added charges later. So I think that what that means for Trump's team is they have to be concerned, for example, that there might be another indictment coming out of Bedminster in New Jersey. I think that at least has to be on the table for them. And I think for all of them, particularly anybody who is involved in that false certification to law enforcement, making false statements to law enforcement, they have to be concerned about possible liability themselves. So definitely, a concern for Trump's team. And I think it just, underscores how aggressive Jack Smith and his team have been.
Molly, I didn't think that this got enough attention this week, but basically between the tape recording and the DOJ saying they can't find a so-called standing order Trump was talking about, basically declassifying whatever the heck he was declassifying on his way out of the White House. He's running out of excuses. I mean, on one hand, he's going on Fox and self-incriminating himself. And then you have the DOJ coming out and say there is no standing order that he has declassified any documents.
Yeah, it's completely shocking that Donald Trump has once again lied. Yeah. I'm just completely shocked. I mean, it's so unlike him. But yeah, I mean, the idea that Trump cared about declassifying documents, I mean, they were trophies. He liked to show them off. He liked people to see that he had power, and he liked that they could serve in his arguments, which is what we're seeing now. I think that it's a pretty, we find him in a situation very much of his own making, right? He could have given back these documents at any time. He has now been indicted twice. We think there will also be, even if there's not another federal indictment, there'll definitely be, it seems like, an indictment coming out of Georgia, too.
And there's still the Republicans, Kurt, who remain not exactly a profile in courage. When this tape came out, what did you see the Republicans do? They didn't talk about the substance of the tape because they know they can't actually defend Trump for what he said. So instead, they're making the tape being leaked as the real issue here.
Yeah, here we go again. Every time the Republican Party is presented with a viable off-ramp away from Donald Trump and all things Trumpism, which has proven to be a political loser for them over and over again, they refuse to take it. The only conclusion that we can reach at this point is they don't want to get away from Donald Trump. For all the belly aching we hear from Republicans who go off the record and who won't actually say anything publicly but privately are so dismayed about Donald Trump's return, it doesn't really seem like any of them are willing to do the obvious thing that needs to be done to divorce themselves from Donald Trump and actually regain some political stability. Instead, they would rather line up behind a walking, command and control, white-collar criminal who just commits crimes as easily as he breathes, who lies as easily as he breathes, and all the while they're trying to convince the rest of us that they're the party of law and order. Doesn't really add up.
Renato, we mentioned that the New York Times, in that Times article, Jack Smith's investigators paying a lot of attention to New Jersey and the golf course in Bedminster. And the recording that he made there, Judge Eileen Cannon is handing down unfavorable rulings in Florida, at least so far. If that does happen, if she continues down that road of unfavorable rulings against Jack Smith, can he take his case to New Jersey? And do you think we'll see a possible search warrant executed there in light of this tape?
It's interesting. I mean, certainly they've had this tape for some time. I suspect, by the way, that this was leaked by the defense team. After all, the prosecution had it for a long time. The defense team just got it in discovery. So by that, I mean Trump's team. But look, I think there's a continued investigation there. If they were going to get a search warrant based solely on the tape, I think they would have gotten it already. But look, the investigation is still ongoing, as we learned. They could bring an indictment there, but it's going to have to be on different facts than what we have in Florida. So Aileen Cannon can do what she's going to do in Florida. This would be over, for example, potential obstruction regarding the documents that have still not been found in New Jersey. That's really what that indictment would have to focus.
Let me get your reaction to this, Molly. The multiple outlets have reported the person speaking is a lady by the name that Trump is speaking to is a lady by the name of Susie Willis or Wiles, who was a top Trump 2024 campaign advisor. She's also reportedly met with investigators regarding the classified documents case. How does Trump, work around this?
Well, she's really a sort of famous Florida campaign operative. She was working for DeSantis, and the DeSantis campaign lost her. So I do think she's I think she's pretty adept, and I don't know that she ends up going. I mean, it's certainly possible. Look, Trump has so much potential criminal exposure on so many different levels that, any single person could theoretically bring him down. But I wonder if Susie Wiles is the person, because she's a pretty seasoned pro, and I think she probably just she switched from DeSantis to Trump with the hopes of helping Trump win.
Yeah, and Kurt, Trump has a new strategy here. I mean, he's like, the way he wants to deal with this tape fiasco is saying, the comments were just bravado. And I got to say, for me, to hear Trump kind of say that he was just full of hot air or bravado or, just blustering, in of itself is quite telling. It sounds like he's getting desperate if he's trying to diminish this by saying it's bravado.
I think that if your defense for being caught on tape talking about the things that he's talking about is, well, I didn't really mean it, I was just kidding, I think you're in a lot of legal trouble. You don't oftentimes see Donald Trump try to walk away from his own words. In fact, he's quite known for doubling down on the things that he says, for meaning every word that he says. That's kind of his whole shtick, right? I'm going to go out there and say all the things that everyone else is too afraid to say out loud. Well, now he's been caught red-handed. It's a smoking gun. And he's going to try to convince all of us, well, I didn't really mean what I said. I don't think that's really going to work. And I think that he knows deep down he is in so much trouble. I mean, how many times are we going to catch this guy on audio tape admitting to committing crimes? Well,
the funny thing is also, to your point on in reference to the Georgia recording, now he walks around telling everyone, I'm a legitimate person. I'm a legitimate person. It's a totally legitimate phone call. I'm a legitimate person. Renato, I got to ask you about this reporting from the Washington Post, and let me get your reaction to it. This was new reporting from the Washington Post that Trump tried to pressure Governor Doug Ducey, who was then at the time the Arizona governor, to overturn the state's presidential election results in 2020, saying if enough fraudulent votes could be found, it would overcome his loss in that state. The size and the scope, it seems, of Jack Smith's January 6th investigation is expanding. I mean, we've been focused on Georgia. We know about the elector scheme, but now this new reporting from the Washington Post suggests there's a lot of substance.
Well, I think what it shows is a pattern of behavior, Eamon. In other words, a common scheme or plan. Molly had mentioned the Fulton County case. There, of course, he was pressuring Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. There was also a call to a man who's now deceased, who I believe there was a recording as well, to the Speaker of the House in Georgia. Here we have another piece where he's engaging in similar behavior. He's trying to pressure a governor in Arizona. We also know about his efforts with state legislators in Michigan. I really could see a kind of a scheme that is charged that is broader than just one state. I also think that evidence could be relevant in a Georgia case, because it really goes to show his intent. It shows that he wasn't just fumbling over his words. He wasn't mistaken when he was talking to Brad Raffensperger. It was part of a common plan to overturn the election.
Really quickly, Renato, where would you bring a case like that is multi-state? If you're talking about Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, places where there may have been an elaborate scheme to overturn it, do you do it in Washington, D.C., because that's where the president was at the time potentially or allegedly orchestrating all of this, or do you go to different states?
I would go to Washington, D.C. That's where the grand jury is that he's using. The judges there are familiar with that grand jury and have been making rulings. That would make a lot of sense. But you know what? I would not rule out state cases outside of Georgia. It's not past the time for example, Arizona or Michigan to conduct their own investigation.
All right, Renato, Molly, Kurt, stick around. We've got a lot more to discuss after